Well, good afternoon. We appreciate you joining us today here on the Fireplace Show. And this is a show that's brought to you for consumers to learn more about their fireplaces, their chimneys, hearth appliances, wood stoves, whatever. And every week we try to bring in what I'm going to classify as subject matter experts. And today is no different, because today you as a consumer are going to get to see a brand new product that's getting ready to come out in the fireplace industry that fulfills a lot of needs. So I got two really great guests on here today, and they're sharing a camera. So the first one I want to introduce to you is a friend of mine that we go back many, many years. I'd also classify him as a mentor, as someone who's helped me through challenging times in my life, and his name is John Meredith. So John, are you ready to rock and roll today on the show?
I am. Thank you, Jerry. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, sir. And we'll tell you a little more about John in a minute. And the other gentleman is one, some years ago, there's a gentleman that is from the 18th century that's known as Count Rumford, who was one of the leading experts, and we still subscribe to his teachings today. However, you're getting ready to meet what I'm going to classify as the 21st century Count Rumford, and his name is Chris Prior. And Chris has probably done more research on fireplaces and has some excellent information that he's going to share with you today. So, Chris, you ready to rock and roll here today, brother?
Rock and roll.
That's good. So, anyway, appreciate you being here. We hope we're going to answer a lot of questions for you. So, John, I'm going to start with you. You own a company by the name of Saber Systems, and you manufacture a lot of products. So let's give them a little brief background from when you were a fireman and came into the chimney industry some years ago.
Yeah, so I was a firefighter and a professional firefighter, started a chimney sweep business and saw some needs for products and worked with a lot of experts to develop some products for the industry. And we started making those 30 years ago, and we've developed a lot of products since then and continue to develop a lot of products that solve a lot of problems for homeowners, chimney interior and exterior. So that's kind of been our hard focus over the years, is to help homeowners solve some of these chimney problems. And a lot of them are used by professional chimney sweeps, even, most every day. So.
Right. So John has developed a lot of products, chemicals, coating systems, really innovative products, and has chimney repair methods and all. So this is part of his new brainchild here. So Chris, I'm going to go to you. You're one of the leading experts in the chimney service and the hearth industry when it comes to fireplaces. In fact, sir, I bow to you with your knowledge, and you and I have had some really great conversations. So what's your background and got you into the world of chimneys and fireplaces?
Yeah, kind of an odd road. Started off going engineer for General Electric, of all things, and gas turbines. And back when the oil embargoes hit in the 70s, I, along with about 5,000 other people, were laid off, and there was just no work for engineers. That was pre-computer chip. So ended up doing whatever I could, and I'd always loved stone and brick and all, even though I wasn't working with it. And I just decided, I think I'm going to work with this stuff. And oh my gosh, that was a long darn time ago. So kind of got in that way. And let's see, been working on this. I think April 1st will be 40 years. So
There you go. And Chris, you also train a lot of people in the chimney service industry and teach masonry skills and other things. Would that be correct?
That's very correct. Yeah, I do that a lot. Yeah.
And he also is the president of the Masonry Heater Association and builds and designs masonry heaters.
Right. And that was what I was getting to. Chris, you've got a background. You build masonry heaters. In fact, you built a masonry heater in John's new house there in Richmond, Indiana, that I saw when I was visiting there about a year ago one day. We had dinner one night.
That's right.
So anyway, what we have here and we're going to talk about today is you guys have come out and you have just come through testing at UL and are getting ready to go to market with a product that you're going to call the Prior Fire Retrofit Fireplace, I believe. So the first thing is, whose idea was this? John, was this yours? Was it Chris's? Did y'all come together on this? Tell me more about what what started you guys on this path to develop this radical new fireplace design you've come up with?
I think Chris and I have been friends for a long time, and we'd meet at trade associations, and I just always felt like there was something there for us to work on. And for years, I would say, hey, we got to get together and start working on stuff. So we started sneaking away during the conventions, and just I had some ideas, and started doing some napkin drawings, and he had some ideas, and it became obvious that that together, 1 and 1 was, there was some synergy there. So 1 and 1 was 4. And so we started, developing some ideas, and then we realized that we needed to test those ideas. So we needed some kind of a facility to test and prove concept. So we built in one of our factories, we built a Hearth lab. We call the Warden Hearth lab in honor of Tesla, because we're both kind of Tesla fans. And so we built this Hearth lab. We built 2 masonry test rigs. And what we found out, there's just not a lot of testing done on masonry fireplaces, because it's not something a manufacturer can stick in a box and ship. So there just haven't been a lot of research done in that. There was some research done in the 30s. And then beyond that, there hasn't been a whole lot of actual fireplace testing done. So we felt like, we could kind of improve on, the existing fireplace technology, which has been around for hundreds of years. And so we needed a lab to do that proof concept. So that's where we started. And then the thing kind of morphed over the years. And as we would test and learn and modify and test and learn. So finally we got something that we feel, that we tested, it works very well. And so we're trying to get it to market. So.
Gotcha. So that's great. So when you started building this fireplace addresses needs and takes care of some potential risk in homes, if I'm understanding this correct. Because one of the problems we have in certain parts of the country and a lot of fireplaces is we have wood many times underneath the fire brick floor, what we would call the inner hearth, or what you may call the fireplace floor. So one of the things that you were doing here was you were developing something that would be a safer fireplace. It was going to be a more efficient fireplace. It's going to use less air, and it's going to radiate more heat. So, Chris, can you go into some more details of what your goals were of this fireplace in the development phase?
Yes. As a matter of fact, John touched on a little bit of the building of the lab. And we actually built a fireplace in the lab that is right out of the textbook, actually from the Brick Institute. It tells you every dimension and what the thickness is and heights and widths and depths and so on. And we actually did some safety testing on that, which is very similar to what would take place up in UL. And what we found with a properly built fireplace, that it would not pass the actual UL codes. So getting to the point where you're talking about wood underneath, if you have just a standard North American fireplace, the temperatures underneath the floor got to be so incredibly high during the test that if you had wood, say, within 4 inches, it would certainly ignite. And same thing even with any masonry or any wood in contact with the masonry on the outside. So that was kind of the starting point. We needed to figure out a way to develop materials and processes that would allow us, to be able to have a fire that would burn where you didn't have to worry about wood in contact like that. So, like I said, it was pretty amazing how hot the floor got on a fireplace that was built right the way the directions would tell you.
Right. Well, you and I both being instructors and teaching people, that's one of the things that I've commonly said about the fireplace design that is actually published by the BIA, which is the Brick Institute of America. And the actual errors in that design that has lost a lot of the truth, that actually compromises the performance of that fireplace and actually causes it to heat up. Now, one of the things is in chimneys and fireplaces is we have something we call laminar flow. And that's how we funnel from a large fireplace opening down to the flue itself, which is much smaller. So what was your thought process on the laminar flow of the Prior Fire retrofit design, Chris?
Well, again, if you go back to some of the research that has been done, there was a fellow named Professor Rosen that did some experimentation back in the late 1930s using fluid models. So laminar flow is basically like a smooth flow. And, with a typically built fireplace, there is so much turbulence in there that, the size of the chimney has to be rather large to the size of the opening to have this thing so it won't smoke. And the reason it is so large, it has to overcome all the turbulence that takes place. So when you start making something more aerodynamic, and almost envisioning a fireplace as if it was a drain where you'd have water flowing through it. And anything you could do to make the water flow smoothly, no abrupt changes in shape and so on, the more laminar, which is a good word, the flow you would have with it. And by doing that, by changing the geometry of the fireplace, you don't need to have such a gigantic flue. The flue is sized so that it'll vent the gases, not also overcome all the little turbulence gremlins that are normally associated with a poorly built one.
Yeah. And I think you just said something that's critical for our listeners to understand is when we look at the movement of smoke, we're calling that pneumatics. When you're looking at the movement of water, we're talking hydraulics. And more people are used to seeing what water does, like coming down a river. And if you ever watch water flowing down a river and it runs into a boulder, a rock, a projection, it causes turbulence. And in the venting system, turbulence is not what we want to see. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. And a matter of fact, the Rosen had proven that a fluid is a fluid, so that smoke will behave identically to the way water behaves. So you can actually use fluid modeling to predict behavior in air movement. And like you said, in a river with a rock, or if you had an abrupt 90-degree bend in the river, you would get an eddy there, a little whirlpool. Well, that's what happens in a fireplace with a smoke shelf, or anytime you have a severe angle, you're going to get little turbulence there, little eddies or whirlpools, and it can almost act like an invisible obstruction that will prevent the gases from flowing freely, and they'll spill out the front.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do, and I hope this works out okay, I'm going to bring up some photos. It may take me just a minute to get them up, so we'll hope for the best here, but I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully we're going to be sharing our PowerPoint here where we can share what's on this screen. Give me just a minute. We'll get it all up here for you, hopefully. So let's see here, get the screen sharing. There it is. So coming up from the beginning. So at this point, hopefully we are, I don't know if I'm looking at, there we go. So Chris, it's going to be, right now, I've got your PowerPoint up in front of me. So you're not seeing you. So feel free, tell them what we're looking at right now.
Okay, this first slide is actually a picture that is taken during our UL testing at the facility up in just north of Chicago. And it's just a snapshot in time of the flame, that you're seeing there. And one oddball thing with the lab there was a really strange airflow through there, and it was amazingly strong little air current that was blowing through, and it was like if it was a regular fireplace, it would have disturbed that flame so much that it would have been spilling out into the room. And at least the aerodynamics of the design are sound enough that even with that disturbance, we're still getting a pretty good flame rolling up. So like I said, that's just a snapshot in time, that photograph right there.
Well, I think one of the things is I want to point out here is this, the design of this fireplace, and you will show you Jerry, you mentioned this in pre-show, but the overfire air system that we built into this, it produces a very tall flame, which I think a lot of homeowners like to see. You know, you don't want to see some lackluster flame in your fireplace. You want to see something that's really tall, gives off a lot of heat and light. And the design of this fireplace produces that.
Okay, so let's do this. While this picture's up, I think there's a very important thing here, because Chris, earlier we talked about the heat that could penetrate through the floor. An example I'm going to give of that is Coach Ron Riviera, who was the coach of the Carolina Panthers several years ago. His house was totally engulfed in flames because of heat transfer through the floor of the fireplace using, believe it or not, gas logs. So as I look at this photo, Chris, what are the slots that we see at the bottom? The wide rectangle holes. What are those for, Chris?
Ah, you're very observant, Jerry. Actually, that is an air intake for the underside of the floor. So at the very bottom of that, there's a sheet metal panel that's insulated on the bottom. There's about a 1-inch air space, and then another sheet metal panel with insulation above that, and then finally the brick for the fireplace floor. So as the fire is burning, you know, that air channel in the bottom, we call it the inlet air cassette, that dumps into a little channel behind the back wall. So the air comes in, it rides up behind the back wall vertically, and then it's actually injected into the fire through all the head and bed joints on the back wall. There's no mortar on the back wall. It's all held apart with a clip system.
Right.
So it allows the preheated air to be injected into the fire. And that accomplishes two things. Number one, it's part of the reason why we passed at zero clearance, because we're actually drawing cool air. So you have a cool air layer coming in beneath the heat and the floor. And then as that's heated up, and that the shape of that tapers, it almost, well, I'll use a $10 word venturi, but it basically accelerates the airflow, and it comes up the back wall. And as the flames ride up the back wall, they actually, like through suction, will pull that heated air into the fire.
Go to slide 6 in the slideshow, Jerry. And I think there's a diagram of that that shows what Chris is talking about. Maybe
yeah, but it makes for a very clean fire and also helps cool the floor.
Right. I think one of the things we need to point out here to anybody watching this is one of the first looks that many people, both in the industry, have ever had of this product, except for a select few. So many people are watching this right now that have not seen this in the industry. So what are we looking at right now? What are those two pictures showing us?
Well, that's just a picture of the lab, and shows some of the instruments and some of the stuff that we were doing to test the safety, efficiency, and the radiant heat output of the fireplace.
Yeah, this is our lab, actually.
This is the Warden lab, yeah.
So that's located in Richmond, Indiana, where your plant is, John. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So now we're looking at a design. So tell them what we're looking at. And on the right, I presume that's the bottom of the fireplace looking under it, Chris. So tell me.
Right, it is the underside of that air cassette, and that little blue trapezoid. That's an actual insulating material. And then you know, you've got the fire brick of the firebox, the floor, and so on. And there's a pretty unique fastening system that holds this into place, which we'll talk about in a little bit here.
Okay, so you ready for me to go to the next slide?
Yeah, go to the next slide. And these are just some drawings that just kind of show you. These are actually some of the patent drawings we put together. But go to the next slide, because I think it.
Yeah, this is a good slide.
This shows the air movement underneath the fireplace and how it gets injected over fire on the back wall. So what's unique about this fireplace is there's actually no mortar joints in the back wall. So the mortar joints that you typically fill with mortar, we're using those to siphon in the air gets injected into the fire over the fire. And so what happens is, as you introduce preheated air into the fire, at that point, it burns off hydrocarbons or particulates or soot or creosote, if you will. And so it produces a much cleaner burning fireplace.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me identify this. Right now, we are looking at a side angle. So you're seeing the red arrows that are, there's 4 of them there on the left-hand drawing. So Chris, one of your specific designs is a rear firebox wall that curves, or we could call it a belly, or I'm not sure what you call that, but we have a curve in it. So let's tell our listeners, why does a Prior Fire have this curve or this belly or whatever we want to call that?
Sure thing. This is actually modeled after some of Rosen's work. So technically you would call this a Rosen style fireplace. And that bulge in the back wall actually acts much like the wing of an airplane. You know, as you get airflow, if you figure the chimney is drawing the air, much like you would like suck on a straw, it's being pulled up. So for the fuel bed and the fire to get around that bulge to feed the draft, it has to accelerate almost like the air moves over the wing of an airplane. It has to speed up to go around that shape. And, you know, it causes very good adhesion and also makes for extremely tall flames. So what those 4 red arrows represent is, you know, heat comes off an object perpendicular to it, straight off of it. So as the back wall's sloping forward, you get a lot of radiation back down into the fuel bed to make it burn more intensely. And as you move up, as if you were standing in front of this, you know, that second arrow would be warming your shin. That middle arrow is shooting radiation straight out into the room. And that upper arrow is actually angling radiation up at your chest. So like when you're standing in front of that, you know, you're getting a full it just broadcasts the radiation evenly into the room. So that's what those arrows represent. And then, you know, back in the right-hand drawing, one thing I learned from my years in the Masonry Heater Association, you know, with all the emissions testing that has been going on for years, is that fires burn best when you introduce overfire air at a variety of locations. You get the best mixing of the oxygen and the gases, and you get as complete a burn as you possibly can have. So in terms of just combustion, that's the best way to do it.
Okay. Chris, let me ask you a question. And this could be, and I think I know the answer, but in many coal stacks that produce electricity that burn coal, that's what they're doing in them. They are injecting air into that system to clean up the emissions. Am I correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So another question for you. If you look to the right-hand side, you'll see where it says air manifold inlet. And you see those arrows are blue. So this is the cooling air, and this is one of the safety features of this fireplace, if I'm not mistaken, where you are pulling in room air to maintain the temperatures under that fire brick. Am I correct?
Correct.
And in testing, you told me that you were 20 degrees lower than what is allowed by Underwriter's laboratory. When we say UL, that is Underwriter's laboratory, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So 20 degrees Celsius underneath, so you're probably looking at 60 degrees Fahrenheit.
Gotcha. Now, that air is moving up the back wall. So what you're telling me is there is no mortar between these bricks, and we'll see the fastening system shortly. So the air is coming in, and what you're saying is by adding this air to the fire and then to the smoking gases, we are cleaning up the atmosphere and discharging less gases into the environment. Am I correct?
You're correct. And also far less particulate matter, which is something that EPA is concerned about. Okay. And you'll see an example when we move ahead in the slides a little bit about some of the testing comparisons we did between this unit and the other unit.
Okay, so what are we looking at now, Chris? You got airs going every which way in this thing.
Right. Well, that's basically the radiation pattern off the back wall of the fireplace. And this is just to show that we have a little radiation deflector at the front, and that helps create a little cool zone out in front of the fireplace, where normally is a very dangerous area if you have any combustibles underneath the floor there. So this also helps direct heat back into the fuel bed, and it's another reason why we're getting such amazing combustion. Is
right.
we're making a little crucible where the actual fire takes place, and no
right.
under fire air. That's like that's a thing from the past. You really don't want to have a grate with your fire sitting on it so the air could come in underneath it. The ideal place is to have the air coming in over the fire. That's the way to get the cleanest possible burn you can get.
Right. And I think that's something you and I both teach in our classes is there's a certain way for air to enter the fireplace and to enter the combustion process. Are you and I in agreement on that?
100%.
Okay, good. Because I like to get Chris Prior to agree with me. Okay. So what we're looking at now, Chris, we got a lot of drawings on the right-hand side that probably don't make a lot of sense. I'm presuming those are some type of clips. But what we're looking at now, and let's also identify this. This firebox you have designed is designed to go into a masonry chimney. Am I correct?
Correct. It's a replacement firebox, or a retrofit system, I guess would be the best way to describe it.
So you could install this in any existing masonry fireplace.
Right.
Right. So that's part of what we have here is many fireplaces in the field are at a point they need to be replaced from any number of reasons. And this is a replacement fireplace to replace the traditional brick and mortar fireboxes you would see in a home, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so what we're looking at now, Chris, is telling me clip attachment pipes and all kinds of stuff. So tell me what we're looking at right now, sir.
Okay, well, again, you know, the old adage, keep it simple, stupid, I suppose is a good one. What we developed here was a way to build. It's a very difficult shape to build from scratch. You've seen when we've done some of these new construction fireplaces with this shape. So for this system, you know, all the brick are actually held in place with specially designed clips. So like for the sidewall, there's a channel that would go in that the brick would sit in, and there's a vertical channel at the back, and there's a series of tubes, and then the brick that you get, the lengths are all pre-cut, and there's a groove cut in the top of the brick and in the bottom of the brick, and there's actually a clip that goes on, and then there's a little pin that fits in the groove. So, you know, the pin goes into the brick below it and the brick above it, and it helps maintain a perfectly flat, you know, true wall. And the clips themselves set the joint spacing. So you need absolutely no masonry skills to build a perfectly straight, level, and true wall. And then what you would do is you'd build both the left and side walls with the clips in them. And then you were done, you would grout it like it was a backsplash in your kitchen. You would take a clay mortar, and we will squeegee it in with a silicone float and then wash it off with a sponge. So you don't have to have a complete full bed joint under the brickwork, because the clip is doing all of the work. So it completely simplifies the installation. And like I said, you need actually no masonry skills at all to be able to build a perfectly set firebox.
One of the things I want to point out too, Jerry, we use a low mass brick, which is a lightweight. It's actually made. It's pressed vermiculite. It's a very strong one. It's a 7,000 psi brick, but it is lightweight, and because it's low mass, this thing produces a lot of heat. In other words, a high mass clay body or brick would absorb the heat. This basically does not absorb a lot of heat. It's insulated as well, and so it just keeps a lot of heat in front of it instead of absorbing into it.
John, let's identify. You use the word vermiculite. And now, I know that's an insulator and you do, but let's make sure people understand what vermiculite is.
Well, it's an expanded mica. It's mined and then it's heated and it's popped like popcorn. And then it's pressed with a binder in a mold, and that's how they make the bricks.
Very high, a tremendous amount of pressure.
And under high pressure. So
yeah. So
Gotcha.
They look like a regular fire brick, but they're very lightweight, very insulative, and non-conductive. So, you get instant heat with it. And the other thing from an installer's point, I know there's probably a few installers out there. It's also very lightweight. So the entire unit is what,
250 pounds and ships in 10 boxes. So nothing weighs over 25, 30 pounds.
And ships UPS rather than common carrier. So one person could easily do this, and within a day you could have the whole thing built. So
right. And I heard you say a while ago, looking and listening to you, the skills that are required are the ability to read your directions, comprehend them, and mechanical skills of fastening. Would that be a good synopsis?
Yeah, I would. I mean, you would want to. This is designed to be professionally installed. It's you have to have basic fireplace knowledge and tools, and a lot of times you would actually remove the damper frame and the back wall of the fireplace to make room for this unit. So it's probably not something most homeowners would want to tackle.
No.
But it is, from an installer standpoint, it's a little easier. So, it brings the cost down to the consumer.
Right. Well, John, as Chris pointed out a while ago, we're looking at the rear wall of that fireplace. And like Chris said a while ago, to build a Prior Fire out of brick requires some very close cutting and a lot of masonry skills. Would that be correct, Chris?
It would be very correct. And in this situation, the back wall is actually the easiest thing to install. The way we have the pretty innovative clip system that holds everything in place. So it takes it's pre-engineered. We've made it so that it's for an installer, like I said, it's something they can easily do in a day. And, they're all pre-cut, so everything is perfect. You really have no on-site modifications that you would need to do.
Okay, now I'm presuming this is the lab at Underwriter's laboratory. Tell me.
Yeah, that is correct. That's the test rig at Underwriter's laboratory. Yeah. So you see that it's covered in plywood, and the plywood's painted black, and there's thermocouples underneath the floor and all around the sides and the smoke chamber.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what you're looking at. It's completely encased, almost gift wrapped in plywood. And the thermocouples are pressed tight between the wood and the masonry. And there's probably 50, 60 thermocouples all around it. So the floor you're looking at is that's a 4-inch, it's actually 3 5/8 thick, and it's sitting on 2 layers of 3/4-inch plywood with thermocouples. And, we actually had to draw out the base of the fireplace on the plywood to make sure they've got the thermocouples right underneath where the heat was going to be.
Right.
So it's a very strict test.
Okay, so this fireplace I'm looking at, Chris, did you ship this to Underwriter's laboratory and they built it? How did this get built at Underwriter's laboratory for testing?
Well, that's a good question too. And again, I'm not quite in the picture, with COVID, normally they would have a local masonry contractor build this test structure, which is essentially a fireplace, very similar to what you'd see from the Brick Institute. But we ended up going up there and building it ourselves. That was back in early November.
We did the installation.
Yeah, we came up again a month. They had a cure for a month, and then we came up and did the installation of our firebox and our smoke chamber material. And then we waited another month, and we actually had to build all the fuel cribs because their fuel crib supplier was non-essential, and we had to build them down in Richmond and ship them up 200 pounds worth of fuel cribs. And then January 5th, we actually went up to have the test performed.
Yeah, and Chris, let's recognize a couple guys, because I remember on social media seeing photos. So actually a couple of y'all's friends, colleagues went up to help you build this. Who were some of the people that helped you?
Well, we had two extraordinary people helping us. Dave Lamb from Cincinnati and Tim Smith, who a lot of you guys know. He's out closer to Indianapolis, and Tim's been involved with like Sweeps Week for years. I've known Tim for years, and they graciously came up and gave us a hand, so the old men didn't have to bend over too much. That was kind of nice.
Well, I don't know. Tim's getting pretty old too these days, but Dave's pretty young as far as he's concerned. That's the thing about it. So the guys you had there, I just wanted to recognize some of the guys that helped you in getting this thing through testing at Underwriter's laboratory. So again, there's our finished product right there. So let me ask you this, Chris. That fire is burning right now in there. And if I were standing in front of that Prior Fire retrofit and it's been burning a while, how far away from that fireplace will I feel heat?
Oh my goodness gracious. If you were like down the hall, you came out of a room, as soon as you saw the fire, you would actually feel heat on your face. It's quite amazing how much heat it will actually produce.
Right.
And again, the shape has a lot to do with it. And the fact that those brick are so insulative, instead of the heat being drawn into the material like a high mass material, it acts like a reflector dish, almost like a satellite dish, and it just broadcasts the heat right out into the room. And it's right in that sweet spot of the infrared spectrum. We won't get too technical, but it's like your body just loves the heat from that type of radiation.
Right. Let's identify that, Chris. This is radiant heat. So the heat you're feeling, think of being in the sun, and you have radiant heat from the sun coming and heating up mine or your old bald heads, right? Is that what we're talking about?
That's exactly what you're talking. And again, it's been so cold all over the U.S. lately. Even, down south. Picture this. It's a cold day. You're in the shadow, and you turn the corner, and there is the sun blazing full in your face. And it might be very cold out, but that sun on your face just feels so amazing. Or another example would be if it was cold outside and the sun's been beating down on a rock for a long period of time, and you were to lean back on that rock, that beautiful warmth that enters would be radiant heat. This is a great slide right here.
Chris, tell us what we're looking. I know, and but let's talk about this. And you have something here called Astm E2558. And most of our people have no idea what that means. So let's explain what we're looking at, because this is part of the benefit of this fireplace is the lowered impact on the environment from use of this fireplace. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. And you want to say what the ASTM is? Actually,
it's a ASTM standard for measuring particulate in wood burning fireplaces, and it uses a device that basically there's a tube that goes into the center of the flue, and then you pull a suction off of that, and you pull it through one of these filters. These filters are weighed to the 10,000th of a gram, and all that goes into a big spreadsheet, and it ends up calculating, basically grams per liter or grams per hour. And so this is just a kind of a visual of one of the filters from the control fireplace or a regular wood burning fireplace there on the left, and the retrofit on the right. You can see that how much it reduces, just a visual of how much it reduces particulate emissions.
Yeah, so that's actually a filter. So there's a sample of the flue gas that's pulled through that filter during the course of the fire. And with that ASTM 2558, it's extremely specific. These are fuel cribs, and you have to build them the way they show you within 1/16 of an inch. And there's a couple of different kindling cribs and a couple of different fuel cribs. And it's all using like lumber. So 4x4s and strips of wood that are 3/4 by 3/4. And they tell you how many nails you put in. at what point in the fire you have to add the fuel. So it's very uniform from one test to the next. And then at the start of before you light the fire, you put one of these filters in what's called a portable dilution tunnel. It's kind of an odd word, but essentially it's just like, that would be almost like the filter on a cigarette. You know, you're actually drawing the flue gases through that filter. And then at the end of the burn, when all the fire is done and consumed, you know, you would pull the filters and then reweigh them. So this just gives you an idea. Like this is actually the wood load for the UL test. There's two sets of cribs, they're called, and you know the pile on the left would actually sit in the back half of the fireplace, and the pile on the right is a little narrower and wider and sits in the front half. So every 7.5 minutes, you can put first the back one in, 7.5 minutes later, a front crib, then a back and a front. That happens 8 times an hour for 14 straight hours. And then at the end of the 14 hours, they do what's called the flash fire test. And they take 4 of the back cribs and wire them together, and 4 of the front cribs and wire them together. And you put all 8 of them in at once as one fuel load. And, you know, they watch all the temperatures on all the thermocouples and the stack temperature. And this is what really separates, can you say men from the boys? You're still allowed to say that in this day and age. Well, anyway, that's where a lot of fireplaces fail. And that's at that like 16-hour mark. And then the test stops when the temperatures on the thermocouples will all like level out and start to fail. So it was a 20-hour test.
Right. So you not only build it, they have specific guidelines of what the wood will be like, what type of wood that is, and then how those, what you call fuel cribs, are even put together and specified right down to the fasteners and where they go and how many. Am I correct?
Exactly. The size fastener and all that. And that pile of wood there, there's actually 4,200 brad nails holding all that together.
Unreal, brother.
So that picture of that wood pile is basically 200 pounds. And after the test, that next picture that you see of the jar, that's actually the ash that was left over after burning that 200 pounds of wood. There was less than a half pound of ash left.
Yeah, the engineers up there were like insanely impressed with the combustion of this. And you know, one of the parameters of that test is that, you know, if the coals start to build up to a height that gets like, say, a third the height of the opening, they would actually pause the test, and you either slow down at how fast you put the cribs in, or you would shovel the coals out till you got back down to the little test andirons. And I know at one point during the burn, the senior engineer came in and asked, how many times did you empty out the coals? And the technician said, none. And they said, what? He couldn't believe it, because normally you'd be 3-4 times shoveling coals out. But with that overfire air, this combustion was so complete that the coals never got higher than the andirons. And, you know, the engineers were like incredibly impressed. They said they'd never seen combustion like that in a fireplace in their life. And they've tested them all. So that was a pretty high compliment to be, have UL engineers impressed like that.
Okay, John, is there any more pictures in this PowerPoint that you want to show?
No, I think that's it. This kind of gives you the highlights of some of the benefits of the product there on the last slide. So.
Right. Okay. So let me get back up here. So anyway, we got a lot of comments. So you'll know, guys, if you're listening, when we're showing the PowerPoint, I can't manipulate. So let's show a couple of the comments here and answer some questions that come here. So this is Stephen Scaly. He's making a statement. This has been a long time coming, and I believe he has a question. So, Chris, John, do you want to answer Stephen's question for him?
Sure. The back wall is it's a 2.5-inch wall thickness on the back wall brick. So it'd be the equivalent of standard fire brick in the shiner position. And that means it's standing up on end.
Okay, good. And then we have a question here from Jason Avery. Does this provide any clearance reductions for the hearth extension?
Yes. Again, 4-inch, you can have 4-inch nominal masonry with wood underneath it, even in the hearth extension.
Okay,
Actually,
so
we probably could have passed at even less
Well,
than
in fact,
that.
because we were so far under the max out temperatures, we're gonna retest it with just 2 inches of floor brick.
okay, so let's identify this, Chris. You use the term, you and I both know what it is, which is nominal. And nominal means it can vary from actual by 1/2 inch. So when you say 4-inch nominal, it can be as thin as 3.5. Am I correct?
Yeah. We were using, it was actually 3 and 5. It's almost like a 2x4. You know, you go buy a 2x4, it's not 2 inches by 4 inches. So
right, that's a dress one. Now, Stephen has another question here. Do we need to take out the existing firebox?
it depends on the shape of the fireplace. At least the back wall has to come out and like the damper frame. In most cases you can leave the side walls in, but if it's a rather tight one, you'd have to take the side walls out as well.
Okay.
The floor will stay.
John, there's another one of your dealers, Lee Rolfe, down in Houston. Just wanted to say hi.
Hey, Lee, how are you, buddy? Good to hear from you.
Okay, and we got another question here from Stephen Scaly.
Okay.
And it is, can we put this in front of a heatilator metal firebox? So I'm presuming he means inside the heatilator box, which is a steel form box inside of masonry, not a factory built. So Chris, you want to identify that question?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that, Steve. This is meant for that. Yes, you do that. And again, the same type of thing. We'll end up taking out the back wall where the back wall slopes forward and that little smoke shelf area, and then it'll fit in there beautifully. It's actually a perfect fix for one of those rusted out metal fireplaces.
Yeah. Jay Walker down in Tallahassee, he says clean burning. So I guess that's a statement, because we would agree from what you showed, it is clean burning. Because that's one of the things, Chris, you talked earlier about the Masonry Heater Association, and you guys get together every year down here in North Carolina, not far from me. One of these days I'm going to get up there when you're meeting, but I'm always out of town. But that's what y'all been working on, is making masonry fireplaces cleaner burning. Am I correct?
Very correct. Oh, for like the last 20 plus years.
Yeah. Okay. So now we have another question from Jason Avery here. Follow up on the hearth extensions. Does it follow the same size hearth extensions as masonry, or the size reduced? And Chris, I'm presuming, Jason, you're talking about the 16-inch hearth extension and the 20-inch, depending on whether it's above or below 6 square feet. So Chris, can you identify that question?
Yes. In terms of that, it defaults to 211. So again, if it's over 6 square feet, you're 20-inch, and under, it would be 16. So yes, that's pretty much the same.
So this is not going to be an answer for an improper hearth extension that's 14 and should be 20. This is not an answer for that particular criteria.
Well, that's not actually part of the test.
Okay.
Excuse me. But again, if you put, we're going to be hopefully retesting that at an even closer clearance. So theoretically, you could put, as long as if you had 4 inches of masonry out in front, that could be sitting on a wood floor.
Okay. So John, I'm going to address this question to you as a manufacturer. Why did you go to Underwriter's laboratory, which isn't inexpensive? It's a pretty hefty investment, because you got to write them a check for the testing, and you got to go do all this work and build all this stuff and everything else. So why did you decide to get it UL listed, John?
Oh, just the gold standard of safety. So we wanted to just make sure we were putting a safe product in the hands of the installers and for the consumer to have a degree of confidence that they knew that this thing had been fully vetted before they installed it in their home.
Gotcha. Okay, we got another question coming up from Chris or John, whoever wants to answer this. The size of the liner, I believe, will be sized according to the opening. You mentioned the size of the flue is usually too big. What size liners will be needed for installation into a normal fireplace size? And the next one was, I was going into this. Let's talk about the smoke chamber. Before we talk, I want people to understand what a smoke chamber is. If you look in your fireplace, if you're a consumer, you got a damper. Usually it's in there. You're going to open it, what we call the throat. And above that, you have what we call a smoke chamber. And the best way that I can identify that is an upside down funnel to funnel the smoke into the flue. Think of an Indian teepee is what I often use in classes. So Chris, do you want to identify? Let's go through about the sizing of your liner, and also what kind of smoke chamber goes with this, sir.
Okay, good. That's a two-part question. So yes. First, this is going to run on an 8-inch round flue. That's 50 square inches of flue. And we had mentioned earlier, this is adjustable from, a rather narrow fireplace all the way up to 41. And the feature of this design, by having, the adjustment take place at the front, the actual area where the fire is built doesn't change in size from a big fireplace to a small fireplace, so that the size of the actual chimney is based on the size of the opening where the fire is built. So that is set up to vent on 8-inch round. And then as far as the smoke, so let's see, the smoke chamber, we also have again, for consumers, picture stucco, okay? There's a material that you would actually, with a trowel, you'd parge on or build up on the existing smoke chamber. And the product that we developed passed at, again, 1-inch thickness of material, and then 4-inch clearance to combustibles with the masonry behind it. So if you had wood, 4 inches of masonry, and 1-inch buildup of this product, that's how we passed UL. And again, that's a big problem. Smoke chambers, otherwise would need to be like 8 inches thick, and you still don't put wood in contact with them. But so you could, if you had 4 inches of masonry and wood in contact, and you put this product on, it passed at 1 inch. We also have, like, if you're going to be putting a liner in, like a stainless sleeve down the chimney, we actually have a manufactured smoke chamber, that inverted funnel teepee, that would attach to an 8-inch stainless steel liner, and that would attach to the top of our unit. So there's two ways to handle a smoke chamber.
Gotcha. So when we talk about the smoke chamber parging, that's where we go in and we hand apply this. Or if you're a consumer and not familiar with the word parging, think of the word like stucco, which you would use on the outside, but we're actually plastering it on. We call it parging within the industry. So is this the same parging material that you've been already selling, John, under your labels, or is this one specific for this product?
Yeah, well, this is one specific for this product, and you can use it on everything else, but Chris and I developed another one based on his preferences for stickiness and insulated material. So we developed a new one, and based on his testing. So
John, that's what we really needed, was another smoke chamber product in this industry. I'm glad you filled that need, brother.
Wait till you try it. You remember that old Coke and Pepsi test they used to have, where you'd take a sip of the Coke and Pepsi and vote on it?
So I'm going to say this new smoke chamber has the Chris Prior, Count Prior's seal of approval.
Yeah,
it does.
It's kind of like, and being from New York, he calls it chamber butter.
No, that's Pilger. That's Pilger.
Hey, you got to keep him controlled now. Remember, we don't want to lose our license here, John. Okay, so I know how Chris can get carried away. So here's another question. When will the product be ready for market, John?
So we'll be shipping this first week of April. We're manufacturing right now. and we're already having trouble keeping up with the demand based on the pre-orders that we've received.
Okay, so got another question for you, John. What are we calling Count Prior's smoke chamber pargin? What are you calling it? The Count? I think we call it the Count Prior smoke chamber choice. How you?
So we're calling it Prior Fire Formula 51 smoke chamber parging material, or smoke chamber retractor material.
Just like Area 51.
But because that was the 51 cast to get him to a place where he was really comfortable.
We started at number 1, and I liked number 51 the best, so that's where we stopped.
Okay. So
I want to call it chamber butter because it goes on like butter. So
okay. So if a consumer is watching us, John, and they've been thoroughly impressed and they want this fireplace put in their home, who do they get it from?
So they could go to so it's available from Heat Shield installers only. So they could go to heatshieldchimney.com. There would be a list of installers there would have this product available to them.
Okay. Now, Josh Kelly is asking you to repeat. He missed the part on how to size a liner. So, Chris, you want to repeat that about the liner size? And I think you said 8 inch. Am I correct?
Yeah. If you're going to put a new liner in for this, 8 inch round would be what you'd want to go with. But if you're doing work on your fireplace, gutting it out, and the flues happen to be in good shape, which every now and again they are, it'll vent on. It just likes to burn.
It'll vent on pretty much anything. You can use your existing chimney. You wouldn't have to really put a liner in it. In most chimneys, if they're in good shape. For
the homeowners that really don't know much about masonry and fireplaces, but know stuff about cars. I love car analogies. Like, this smoke, like the fireplace itself is like kind of a high performance engine. That really nice smoke chamber design that we have is like the header. And then your 8 inch liner is like the tuned exhaust system. So, they really work in concert with each other. And, one thing which I really am proud of with this is that it is easy to light. It is a pleasure to burn. It has tall flames. It's almost impossible to get it to smoke. It's just a very easy, friendly fire, and it just loves to burn wood.
Yeah.
One of our customers said it puts the fun back in fire, makes fire fun.
Sure.
Stephen's got another question on there, and I presume this is a question or it might be a statement, but in order to meet the listing using the liner, it would need to be a insulated 8 inch round. Would that be correct?
So yes, whatever. Yeah, you got to follow the manufacturer's instructions for whatever system you're using. But insulation is definitely recommended for sure.
Well, guys, John, is there anything else you would like to share? We've been going right about an hour, and I think this is very informative. Maybe, so you guys will know that are not in the industry, that many of these guys get CU, which is continuing education credits. And maybe we should have filed today for those, because I think this has been a very informative seminar. And, from Chris and John, y'all have provided. So, John, anything you would like to add in before we close this show out today?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I've got one thing for the installers out there. The other really kind of unique feature about this particular system is that it's completely rebuildable. So if for whatever reason a brick broke or something like that, in a matter of 20 minutes, you can easily take out anything above it, but remove a brick if it broke, and build it right back up and regrout it in no time at all. So that's one nice feature. Some things that are precast and all, you really can't fix them. So that's one big thing that I really wanted to make sure that this thing was like completely rebuildable.
Yeah. Well, like I said, this is actually, to my knowledge, the first time you have spoke to people all over the country in the industry. You've spoken to small groups. You demoed at your masonry class today. But I think you gentlemen have given a pile of information today on this show. And I want to thank you both for taking your time, because Chris, I think you actually might have delayed a flight in order to participate with me today. And I really, really appreciate that. I assume, Stephen asked, I assume you're using refractory in your side panels. Would that be correct?
No.
No.
We actually developed the cement for that. We looked around and couldn't find a commercially available cement that I liked. So we actually invented our own cement. And again, it ties into the rebuildable column.
Yeah.
I didn't want to have a cement that was so hard that you would actually break the brick trying to take it apart. So the way we tested the cement was we kept making it harder. In other words, I wanted to seal everything up and be strong, yet you could take and pop it apart and peel the mortar off with a putty knife without hurting the brick. And that's what we achieved. So it's a piece of cake to take this thing apart and then grout it back up again and seal it up.
Yes.
It's a really good cement.
Just real quick before we close, Ron Clark was asking if we're going to be having some workshops on this. And yeah, we're having, actually, we'll be announcing some workshop schedule here very soon.
Okay, gotcha. So this will be a product sold by Heat Shield, and then it's going to be offered by and to your dealers in your Heat Shield network. Am I correct, John?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, that's your plan with this, and so it should be available. We're not here to talk pricing today, because it's going to depend on parts of the country and those kind of things. So I told John, since this is consumer and dealers will both be on here, but Ron Clark says thanks, John. So guys, y'all have presented some significant information, and I also want to congratulate you both, because I know how hard y'all have worked for. How many years on this, Chris?
Oh my gosh, this particular one has to be at least 5 years. So that's pretty cool. From napkin drawing to testing at UL in 5 years. That's pretty cool.
Well, I was told about it some years ago, but I was swore to secrecy by Mr. Meredith. We don't talk about these type of things. There's certain things we just keep to ourselves. Stephen says this is very exciting. Thank you all. And here we go. And Ron has said, thanks, John. And then he repeats too, thanks, Chris. So anyway, gentlemen, and for mine, I want to thank you both. You both, number one, you're really good friends of mine. You're really good. John, we go back a long way. And Chris, I feel like same thing. And you guys really make a difference. There's probably, two of the most respected guys I have ever met in this industry are on this call with me today. And everybody knows that, John, and Chris, you too. So I'm going to wish you success. I want to really thank you very much for coming on this show with me today and sharing this knowledge with everybody. So if you want to know more about this, those are your areas. The replay of this will be up. If you missed part of it, it'll be stored on my Facebook channels. It will be on our YouTube channels and everywhere else. So I hope this has been informative to everybody. So John, Chris, I appreciate a lot. And with that, we're going to end this show. And we appreciate everybody being with us immensely today and joining us all here on the Fireplace Show.